Chapter 7. I stared through the glass at the photo of Louisa. I stared at those round blue eyes, at that perfect smile, at the honey blonde hair brushed casually back, so soft against her perfect skin. The black crepe draped around the photo didn't belong. She was so light, so pretty, so happy. I couldn't picture her wearing black. She shouldn't be in this dark, heavy case, I thought. She shouldn't be here with her dates under her photo. The display case was like a glass casket. I was staring into Louisa's casket, staring at her smiling face, her pretty blue eyes. I turned away with a violent shudder. I felt that I was somehow invading her privacy. "She was Jonathan's girlfriend?" I asked Dawn. Dawn nodded. I wanted to ask more. 100 questions flooded my mind. I wanted to know everything about her. I wanted to know what she was like, and I wanted to know how she died. And why did Dawn say it would change my idea of Jonathan? But the fifth period bell rang right over our heads. The hall rang out with kids stampeding noisily to class. Dawn gave me a quick wave and hurried away, leaving me standing there with Louisa. My eyes locked on Louisa's once again, and as I stared, the voices and laughter echoing down the hall faded away. Louisa and I were alone. "What is your story, Louisa?" I asked silently. "What happened to you up at the falls?" She stared back at me through the glass. 1978 to 1993. The dates seemed to shimmer and then blur. Was that sadness I detected deep in those blue eyes? Sadness behind the posed smile? I had to force myself to turn away. To my surprise, the hall was nearly empty. The second bell was about to ring, and I hadn't even collected my books. How long had I been standing there? I knew I had to talk to Dawn, had to find out the answers to all my questions. Avoiding the display case, I jogged past it and headed to my locker. I'll call Dawn later, I decided. I'll make her tell me everything. The afternoon seemed to drag on for days. I was very distracted. I don't think I heard a word anyone said. After school, I spent a couple of long, dreary hours in the computer lab, typing my social studies research onto a disk. Normally, I enjoy doing research. I like digging around in old books for facts and information. It's sort of like being an archaeologist. But I had joined the class so late, and I was so far behind everyone else, I felt really pressured. Shocklin High seemed a lot more intense than my old school. Also, I wasn't used to the kind of computers they had in the computer lab, so I kept making mistakes. That night, struggling to concentrate on my math homework, I found myself still thinking about Louisa, still eager to unravel the mystery about her. I kept calling Dawn all evening. At first there was no answer, and then the line was busy for hours. So frustrating. I didn't get to talk to Dawn about Louisa until lunch period the next day. I forced Dawn to gulp down her lunch. She was only having a salad anyway, and then I dragged her to the display case in front of the building. "You have to tell me the whole story," I insisted, staring at the photograph, finding myself searching once again for the sadness in Louisa's eyes. "What happened to her?" Dawn hesitated. She leaned against the tile wall, toying thoughtfully with a thick strand of black hair, wrapping it and unwrapping it around her finger. "You sure you want to know?" "Yeah, I'm sure," I replied impatiently. "Tell me what happened." "No one really knows," Dawn said, still fingering her hair. "I mean, no one knows for sure." I groaned. "Start at the beginning," I urged. Dawn waited for a group of cheerleaders to pass. They were in their blue and white uniforms, laughing and playfully shoving each other into the walls. When they had turned the corner, Dawn let go of her hair and took a step closer to me. "It happened last January. It was a really warm day for January. Louisa and Jonathan went bike riding up to the falls. Somehow, Louisa and her bike went over the falls, and she died." I gasped and shut my eyes. "Over the falls?" I tried not to picture it. It was so horrible. The falls were so steep. The water crashed straight down onto those jagged black rocks. "Over the falls," Dawn repeated softly. "But Jonathan," I started. I didn't really know what I wanted to say. "Jonathan told everyone he had left Louisa for a minute or two," Dawn continued, staring into the display case, her hands knotted into tight fists at her sides. "Jonathan said he saw someone back on the bike path, or he thought he saw someone. Anyway," Dawn sighed, "he went to see who it was, and when he came back—" She didn't finish her sentence. I swallowed hard, staring into the display case. Louisa's photo was just a blur of color to me now, all blues and pinks, surrounded by blacks. "When he came back, Louisa was gone?" I managed to ask. Dawn nodded. "Jonathan looked for her, and then he saw her bike down below, all mangled. It had caught on the rocks." "And Louisa?" I asked, my voice choked with the horror of it all. They dragged her body out downriver, Dawn said in a whisper. 2 days later, she was cut to pieces, I guessed. Someone had cut her? Dawn shook her head grimly. The police said she'd been cut up by all the rocks. I tried to focus on the photo in the display case, but it wouldn't come clear. I rested one hand against the wall to steady myself. Such a horrible story. And to think that I'd just been up at the falls, with Jonathan. I could picture it all so clearly. I could hear the roar of the falls in my ears. I could see the winding dirt bike path and the woods behind it. I could see the cliff edge over the falls. I could see the black pointed rocks in the river below. I could see it all. I turned to Dawn, who had folded her arms over her chest. Why did she kill herself? I managed to ask. What makes you think she killed herself? Dawn asked with surprising emotion. Huh? I gaped at her, trying to figure out what she was trying to tell me. The principal, Mr. Thomason, passed by, dabbing a wet handkerchief over a dark stain on his yellow necktie. He glanced up as he walked by us, nodded solemnly, and disappeared into his office, still working on a tie. I was Louisa's best friend, Dawn confided. I thought she was perfectly happy. She sighed and lowered her eyes to the floor. Then she added, I guess you never really know another person, even a close friend. You never really know what's in their mind. But the police decided it was suicide, Dawn interrupted, still staring at her white sneakers. In case you didn't already know it, Jonathan's parents are very rich. They got the police investigation to end very quickly. Dawn's words stunned me. I raised my hands to my forehead and rubbed my throbbing temples. But no one suspected Jonathan, did they? I asked, my voice choked with emotion. No, not really, Dawn replied reluctantly. She raised her eyes to mine. But there were stories, you know how rumors get started. What kinds of rumors? I demanded. Just rumors, Dawn replied edgily. Rumors that Jonathan and Louisa had had a big fight, that Jonathan wanted to break up with her and start going with someone else. Someone else? Well, some kid saw his car parked in Ruby's driveway one night. I stared hard at Dawn, trying to understand what she was saying, trying to read her mind, to figure out what she really believed had happened. Dawn, you don't think that Jonathan killed Louisa, do you? I asked. No, of course not, she replied quickly. Too quickly. She grabbed my arm and moved her face close to mine. But I'd be careful, Annie, she whispered. Careful? What did she mean? I'd be really careful, she repeated in a low whisper, grabbing my arm tightly. Dawn? I've got to run, she said, letting go. Later, okay? Before I could reply, she started jogging down the hall. Be careful? Her words remained in my mind. What did she mean? Did she mean to be careful of Jonathan? Did she really think that Jonathan murdered Louisa, pushed her over the falls, then got her parents to hush it up with the police? No, no way. She said she didn't think that Jonathan had killed Louisa, so why was Dawn warning me to be careful? I shoved my hands into my jeans pockets and tried to stop from trembling. I wanted to walk away, to go to my locker, to go to my next class, to think about something else, anything else, but Louisa wouldn't let me go. Her black draped photo beckoned to me, called me, pulled me in. I stood there staring through the glass at her. Dawn had told me the whole story, but she hadn't really told me any of it. There is a story behind the story, isn't there, Louisa? I asked silently. There are secrets you haven't revealed, secrets you may never reveal. I stood there in the brightly lit hallway, hands shoved into my pockets, and stared at the photo as if searching the pretty face for the answers it hid. I don't know how long I stared at it, and I don't know how long it took me to realize that someone else had joined me. Someone else was standing right beside me, so close that his shoulder pressed against mine. I don't know how long it took me to realize he was staring intently at me as I stared at Louisa. She didn't kill herself, he said. Chapter 8. What did you say? I cried, startled. I took a step away from him and studied his face. He wore round glasses with thin gold frames. He was short, shorter than me, and thin like a pencil. He had a lean face with intense brown eyes, exaggerated by the eyeglasses. His brown hair stood straight up in a short flat top. Taking another step back, I saw that he was wearing a green and black striped polo shirt over baggy brown chinos. He flashed me a nervous smile and blinked 2 or 3 times behind his glasses. Hi, he said shyly. You were in the computer lab after school yesterday, right? He had a surprisingly deep voice. He kept blinking nervously and shifting his books as he talked. Yeah, I replied. I was there too. Did you see me? I shook my head and smiled at him. I was concentrating so hard on keyboarding my research, I didn't see anybody, I confessed. His narrow face fell in disappointment. My name is Ryan, he said shyly. Hi, I said. Is that your first name or last? I have 2 last names, he replied, a smile slowly spreading across his face. I mean, both of my names could be last names. Ryan is my first name, Ryan Baker. I laughed. Do you have a last name for a middle name? No, he replied seriously. I don't have a middle name, just two last names. I'm Annie Kieran, I told him. I know, he blurted out, then blushed. I mean, I heard someone say your name. You just started here, right? Right, I said. I glanced up at the clock outside the principal's office. The bell was going to ring any second. He cleared his throat nervously and turned his gaze to Louisa's picture. She was a really good friend of mine, he confided, his face completely expressionless. I mean, we were really good friends. Yeah? I didn't know what to say. We didn't go out or anything, Ryan continued, staring hard into the display case. We were just really good friends. In fact, he hesitated. He changed his mind about what he was going to say. What a terrible thing, I muttered awkwardly. Something about Ryan made me feel very awkward and uncomfortable. I guess it was his nervousness. You heard the whole story, he asked, staring at Louisa. Yeah, most of it, I replied. Well, she didn't kill herself, he cried with surprising vehemence. That's what I thought he'd said before. She didn't kill herself. How do you know? I blurted out, taking another step away from him. I know it, he snapped. He blushed again. The bell rang, startling us both. I hesitated. He didn't move. Guess we should get to class, I said, eager to get away from him. He nodded, still not moving. Are you busy Saturday, Annie? Would you like to go to a movie or something? His question caught me by surprise. My mouth dropped open. I gaped at him as if I didn't understand what he was asking. I must have looked like a total jerk. Why did Ryan make me feel so awkward? I guess you're probably busy, he muttered unhappily. Well, some other time, maybe. I remembered that I did have a date with Jonathan on Saturday, for the afternoon at least. Yeah, some other time, I said, feeling foolish. Nice to meet you, Ryan. He mumbled something, avoiding my eyes, and hurried away. I watched him disappear around the corner. Strange dude, I said aloud. Then, taking one last glance at Louisa's photo, I turned away and hurried to class. The afternoon was pretty much a disaster. I had done the wrong pages in the math workbook, and Mr. Woolrick insisted on making fun of me in front of the entire class. Real sensitive guy, Mr. Woolrick. And then I was trying to drink from the water fountain next to the gym, and the water went down the wrong pipe, and, in front of a big crowd, some boy I'd never seen before started slapping my back to help me stop choking. Of course it didn't help, and I was totally mortified. I was pretty well wrecked by the time I got up to the computer lab after school. I probably should have just gone home and vegged out with some MTV for the rest of the afternoon, but I still had several pages of research to type into the computer. The computer lab was empty except for a couple of girls typing furiously away in the back. I looked for Ryan and was relieved to see that he wasn't there. Just thinking about him made me uncomfortable. Maybe I'm prejudiced against guys who were shorter than I am, I thought. No, that wasn't the reason he made me feel awkward. It was just that he was so nervous and awkward himself. And he was saying such revealing, frightening things to me, a total stranger. Louisa didn't kill herself. Why did he say that to me? Was he deliberately trying to scare me or something? I shook my head hard as if trying to shake Ryan out of my mind. Then I found my disk in the file and inserted it in the computer I had used before in the front row. I booted the disk, located my file, and called it up. The computer whirred, and the screen went black. Hey, wait! I cried aloud. Where were all the notes I had typed in yesterday? I must have done something wrong. They must be here. They've got to be here. I hate these stupid computers, I muttered under my breath. I turned off the machine and started again. I called up my file. Again, the computer whirred obediently. The name of my file appeared at the top, but the rest of the screen was blank, completely blank. My throat tightened. I suddenly felt sick. Where are you hiding my stuff? I asked the computer. I stared at the blank screen in angry disbelief. My notes, all of my work, was gone, erased. A heavy, sinking feeling in my stomach. I hit the keys, moving the screen down, page after page. All erased, all a total blank, page after page after page. No! I uttered a cry of total exasperation. This can't be happening. Wait. There is something at the end of the file. 2 lines of type. I was so upset, it took a while to focus on the words. As I read the lines, the sinking feeling spread over my entire body, and I felt cold all over. At the bottom of the screen were 2 short sentences. Stay away from Jonathan. It could save your life. Chapter 9. It wasn't an accident, I realized. All of my notes weren't erased by accident. The computer didn't do it. A person did it. Someone erased my work. then typed the threatening message at the end. "Who?" I cried, not realizing I was talking aloud. I turned and saw the two girls in the back look up at me. I clicked off the computer and, leaving the disk in the machine, shoved my books into my backpack and burst out of the room. I was breathing hard, my temples throbbed. I ran down the hall, my sneakers thudding loudly on the hard floor, then down the stairs. Who did that to me? I wondered. All my hard work, and I was already so far behind everyone else. I felt like crying, but I forced myself not to. Who did it? I ran past the empty classrooms, past the janitor carrying two large gray wastebaskets, past rows of silent lockers. I came to an abrupt halt in front of Louisa's display case. Don't stop, I told myself, but something kept me from running further. Louisa stared out at me. Her smile had changed. She was warning me to stay away from Jonathan. No. Don't get weird, Annie, I scolded myself aloud. I forced my eyes away from the photograph and hurried around the corner. Laughter, up ahead. I saw Dawn leaning against her locker, books and notebooks at her feet, and I saw Caleb standing close to her. They were laughing giddily about something. They stopped when they saw me approaching. Got to go, Caleb said, reaching down and picking up some of the books and handing them to Dawn. How's it going? He called to me. Peachy, I replied sarcastically. Just peachy. But Caleb had taken off, waving to Dawn without waiting for my answer. Hi, Annie. What's your problem? Dawn asked, stooping to pick up the rest of her stuff. Somebody erased all my work, I blurted out breathlessly. Dawn straightened up, leaving her books on the floor. Huh? I repeated what I'd said. Her mouth dropped open. She shook her head. I told her about the warning at the end of the file, telling me to stay away from Jonathan. Her expression turned thoughtful. She tugged at her hair. Who would do such a mean thing? She asked. I shrugged. I don't even know anyone, I wailed. This is only my second day in this dumb school. You want to go somewhere and talk about it? Dawn offered. I don't know, I replied miserably. I think I'll just go home. I'm having a bad day, and... I stopped when I saw Jonathan turn the corner. He had his head down and was loping along quickly. A smile spread across his face when he spotted me. Hey, hi, he shouted. He came hurrying up to us, his backpack over one shoulder, a tennis racket and a blue case in one hand. What are you guys doing here so late? Caleb had detention, and I had to get some notes from him, Dawn explained. Well, you're in major trouble if you need notes from Caleb, Jonathan teased her. They were my notes. I had to get them back from him, Dawn said. She stooped and began picking up her stuff from the floor. Jonathan turned his attention to me. What are you doing? I felt a sudden tremor of fear. The warning on my computer screen flashed in my mind, and I suddenly saw Louisa's face. Did you kill her, Jonathan? The question popped into my mind. I stared at Jonathan. Was I really afraid of him? No. The feeling of fear quickly faded. He smiled at me warmly, raking his free hand back shyly through his thick hair. His green eyes seemed to smile too. Jonathan is no killer, I decided. I was up in the computer lab, I told him, but something happened to my disk. All my work was erased. I'm not surprised, Jonathan replied. Huh? I stared at him, startled by his matter-of-fact words. Dawn glanced up at him too. Those old apples are terrible, Jonathan explained, bouncing a tennis racket against his shoulder. They're practically falling apart. My cousin goes to Franklin Heights, and he says they have dozens of brand new Macs in their computer lab. Well, I don't know if it was the computer's fault or not, but all my work is lost, I said unhappily, deciding not to tell him about the wording someone had typed at the end of the file. Dawn shoved the books and stuff inside her locker, slammed the door, and locked it. I've got to run, she turned to Jonathan. What are you doing hanging around so late? You have detention too? He raised his tennis racket. Tennis team practice, he told her. We're going to be all-state this year. In your dreams, Dawn muttered sarcastically. Jonathan's grin grew wider. No, really. I've got to go, Dawn said, turning to me. If I'm late for work, they yell at me a lot. See you, I said, thinking about my lost notes. You want to do something Saturday afternoon? She called back to me halfway down the hall. I have a class in the morning, but later we could drive to the mall or something. I can't, I called back. Jonathan and I are going to test out my new bike. Want to come along? No thanks, I'm in a shopping mood. See you around. And she disappeared out the side door. Jonathan and I were alone now, alone in the long empty hallway. He spun the racket handle in his hand. I struggled to think of something to say. I wondered if I should tell him that I knew about Louisa. Somehow, this didn't seem like the time or the place. Maybe I'll tell him on Saturday, I thought, or maybe not. I mean, what's the point of saying anything about it? And what could I possibly say? Want to walk me home? I asked, my nervous stammer suddenly returning. Or would you like me to walk you home? He smiled but shook his head. Can't. I've got to get back to practice. I just came in to make a phone call. Okay, I said, shifting my backpack on my shoulders. See you later. I'm really psyched about Saturday. Me too, he said, twirling the tennis racket. We walked together to the side door, our footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. He started to push open the door, then stopped. He hesitated. Then, to my surprise, he leaned down and kissed me, pushing his lips against mine, softly at first, then harder. I was so stunned I swallowed noisily. Looking over his shoulder as we kissed, I suddenly saw something. A flash of color. Someone watching us from the corner where the hallway turned. I backed away from Jonathan to see better. Whoever it was pulled back out of sight, but not before I saw a flash of red hair. Ruby. Come here, Goggles. Come sit on my lap. I've been calling to the stubborn cat for 10 minutes, but he refused to budge. He just sat in the doorway to the den, staring up at me in the armchair as if I were crazy. Okay, stay there, I said crossly, giving up. Be as unfriendly as you like, you fat furry mop. As soon as I said that, the contrary animal hurried across the room and leapt into my lap. I laughed. I should have used reverse psychology on you before, I told him, stroking the soft white fur on his back. Goggles put up with me for about a minute, then scampered away. It was Friday night and I was alone in the house and feeling restless. My parents were at a party at the community college, and my brother Kenny had a sleepover at one of his new friends. I tapped my fingers against the arm of the leather chair, trying to decide what to do. There was nothing on TV. The cable hadn't been hooked up yet, so we only had 3 channels. I knew I should do more research for my social studies term paper, but I just wasn't in the mood. I mean, who does homework on a Friday night? Goggles, where'd you go? I called. Then I scolded myself for pestering the cat. Goggles wasn't very good company. I stood up, thinking maybe I'd do something with my hair. Wash it, then try to style it like that model I saw in a picture in 17. As I started for the doorway, the photo of Louisa flashed into my mind. I saw her hair. It was as blonde as mine, but prettier and wavier. It fell so casually, so naturally. It looked as if she didn't have to fuss with it at all. She doesn't have to fuss with it any more, I thought grimly. She's dead. I tried not to, but for the 100th time I pictured poor Louisa plunging over the falls with her bike, screaming all the way down, until she hit the sharp rocks with a sickening splat. No! Why did I keep imagining that horrifying scene again and again? Why couldn't I stop thinking about her and her hideous death? Think about something pleasant, I told myself. Force Louisa out of your thoughts. Think about something good that's happening in your life. And then I thought of Jonathan. I wondered what he was doing. I wondered if he was sitting around the house as bored as I was. Go ahead, call him, I urged myself. I dropped back onto the big armchair and picked up the phone from the end table beside me. I hesitated. I suddenly felt nervous. Go ahead, Annie, I thought. Call him. What's the big deal? Holding the receiver, I realized I didn't have Jonathan's phone number. I punched in 411 and asked information. Then, repeating the number over and over so I wouldn't forget it, I quickly punched it in before I lost my nerve. It rang once. Twice. I realized I was squeezing the receiver so tightly my hand hurt, so I loosened my grip. 3 rings. He isn't home, I thought, disappointed. No one's home. Someone picked up in the middle of the 4th ring. Hello? Mrs. Morgan? I stammered. Is that you, Ruby? Mrs. Morgan asked, sounding surprised. Hasn't Jonathan picked you up yet? He left for your house a long time ago. I froze. My blood seemed to stop flowing. My body turned to granite. I was a statue, a cold statue. Ruby? Jonathan's mother asked. Sorry, I have the wrong number, I managed to say. I slammed down the receiver. Jonathan is out with Ruby tonight? I scolded myself for feeling so hurt. He had a perfect right to go out with Ruby after all. It wasn't like Jonathan and I... We weren't... He and I never said... I took a deep breath and held it. I tried to chill out, to stop the angry, upset thoughts from careening through my mind. I looked down and saw Goggles staring out at me from the doorway with his big blue cat eyes. Jonathan's out with Ruby tonight, I told the cat. I jumped a mile as the phone rang. Goggles scampered away. I picked it up before the 2nd ring. A harsh, raspy voice began talking before I even said hello. Computers don't lie, someone whispered loudly. Stay away from Jonathan Morgan. 1 dead girlfriend is enough. Chapter 10. I couldn't get to sleep after that. The raspy, whispering voice kept repeating its crude warning in my mind. I hadn't been frightened at first. Sitting in the den, staring at the phone beside me, I'd been more angry than frightened. Did someone really think they could scare me away from Jonathan by whispering stupid threats over the phone? The more I thought about it, though, the more frightened I became. The phone caller knew about the computer. He or she obviously was the one who erased my term paper disc. And did the caller also slash Kenny's bike tires that afternoon when I met Jonathan? Whoever it was knew how to reach me, knew where I lived. I shuddered. I suddenly remembered a movie I'd seen on TV, where a babysitter is alone in a house, and she starts getting frightening phone calls, and the caller is upstairs, right in the house with her. I got up and scurried around the house, making sure the doors were locked, as if that would do any good if someone really wanted to get me. It's just a practical joke, I told myself aloud. My trembling voice didn't sound very reassuring. And again, I thought of Louisa. She was really dead, no practical joke. Later, I went to bed and couldn't get to sleep. The shadows on my ceiling looked like dark, pointed rocks. I stared up at them wide-eyed, feeling the fear choke my throat, hearing the whispered threat over the phone, the raspy voice like water rushing over the falls. Somehow, I eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I called Dawn right after breakfast. I had to talk to someone. "I'm rushing out," she said, surprised to hear from me so early. "I have this stupid electrical engineering class on Saturday mornings." "You have what?" I demanded, certain that I hadn't heard her correctly. "You heard me," she replied, groaning. "It's a beginner's course in electrical wiring and stuff at the Y. It's 2 hours every Saturday morning. You see, Ruby thinks that girls should know how to do junk like that. You know, have skills, and she talked me into taking the class with her." "How did she ever do that?" I asked. "Well, the instructor's this really cute guy," Dawn started. She sighed. "I don't know. We've only done it a couple of weeks. It's kind of interesting, circuits and stuff." "Weird," I said. "What's up?" she asked. "I got this call last night," I said. I told her about the frightening call, the threat. "That's really gross," Dawn exclaimed. "Did you tell your parents?" "Well, no," I replied. "Maybe you should tell them," Dawn urged. "Whoever this nut is, he might be serious. I think your parents should know." "What makes you think it's a he?" I asked. Dawn was silent for a moment. I could practically hear her brain working over the phone line. "Why, who do you think it is?" she asked finally. "Ruby, maybe?" I said. I hadn't really thought about it before that second. I hadn't really suspected Ruby. But suddenly, the whispered, raspy voice sounded a lot like Ruby's to me. "Ruby?" Dawn sounded stunned. "Hey, Annie, I don't think so." "But, Dawn—" "Ruby's okay," Dawn interrupted. "You shouldn't trust first impressions. She's really okay." "Well, you know her better than I do," I said reluctantly. "But something about the whispered voice—" "Come on, why would Ruby try to scare you away from Jonathan?" Dawn demanded. "Well, for one thing, they went out together last night," I said. "Huh?" Dawn sounded really shocked. "Are you sure?" she asked breathlessly. "Yeah, I'm sure." I told Dawn about my phone call to Jonathan's house and how Mrs. Morgan mistook me for Ruby. "Wow," Dawn kept repeating. "Wow." "How come you're so surprised?" I demanded. It took her a while to answer. "It's sort of a long story," she said. "I'm just surprised is all. I'll have to ask Ruby all about their date at our class. I'll tell you about it later. I'm late." "But, Dawn—" "Are you still going bike riding with Jonathan this afternoon?" she asked. "Yeah, I guess." "Well, be careful, okay?" And then Dawn hung up. "Be careful?" I stared at the humming phone receiver. What did she mean? Be careful of what? Of Jonathan? Jonathan arrived a little before 2. I watched from the living room window as he sped up our driveway on his bike and left off while it was still going, letting the bike topple to the grass. He didn't see me. I watched him from the window as he pulled down his pale blue sweatshirt and pushed back his hair with both hands. It was kind of fun spying on him. He's so great looking, I thought. He should be in Hollywood, starring on TV shows. I suddenly remembered something my mom had said a long time ago about not hanging around with boys who were better looking than I was. It's funny the things that pop into your mind for no reason at all. The front doorbell rang. I hurried across the room and pulled open the door. Jonathan seemed really glad to see me. We talked for a few minutes, just making small talk. I pulled a long green blade of grass from his hair. "How'd you get this?" I asked, twirling it in my fingers. "Mowing the lawn this morning," he groaned. "My dad always has to be the first on his block. Only I'm the one who has to do the mowing." He scratched his head, frowning. "And then, Dad says we mowed so early in the season we have to rake. Only I'm the one who does the raking. I'm totally wrecked." "So you don't want to go riding?" I asked, unable to conceal my disappointment. He laughed. "No, I need to go riding, just as long as we don't ride on grass." My mom came by, carrying one of the still unpacked cartons from the back. I introduced Jonathan to her. She set down the carton and shook his hand. I could tell by the look on her face that she was impressed with how good-looking he was. A short while later, I pulled my new bike out of the garage and walked it over to Jonathan on the driveway. It was a warm, sunny day with a few puffy clouds in the sky. The air was heavy and wet, almost like summer. "Excellent bike!" Jonathan exclaimed, rubbing his hand along the shining blue frame. "Really excellent." "You can't tell it's used, can you?" I asked. "It has one tiny scratch on the side here, that's all." He admired the bike for a while longer. "It's a 10-speed?" "No, 21. "Excellent." He raised his eyes to mine. "Let's get going." "Great," I said enthusiastically. I lifted my leg over the frame and straddled the bike, preparing to glide down the driveway. "Where shall we go?" He narrowed his eyes in concentration. "Well..." The sun disappeared behind one of the puffy clouds. A shadow rolled over us. The air immediately grew cooler. I felt a sudden chill as Jonathan stared into my eyes and said, "Let's ride up to the falls."